This video is part of Perfect Competition. This is part 2 of profit maximization. In part 1, we looked at the output decision. We found that firms choose the output level by finding where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Now we want to look at the shutdown decision. That is, given that the firm has identified the profit maximizing level of output, should the firm stay open and produce this output level, or would it be more profitable to shut down? A firm will shut down only if it can reduce its loss by doing so. Shutting down means the firm stops producing, which means it has nothing to sell to then receive revenue. And if the firm shuts down, it stops paying avoidable costs. Variable costs are avoidable. Variable costs can be defined in two ways. One, variable costs are the costs that vary with the amount the firm produces, or variable costs are the cost of the variable inputs. Remember, in the short run, some inputs are fixed while others are variable. Variable costs come from the inputs that are variable. Other costs are fixed. Fixed costs can be defined as the costs that don't vary with the amount of output the firm produces. Fixed costs still have to be paid even if the firm shuts down. Or fixed costs can be defined as the cost of the fixed inputs. Again, in the short run, at least one input is fixed. Fixed costs are the costs the firm pays for those inputs. Firms compare revenue to variable costs when deciding whether to stop operating. They will stay open if total revenue more than covers variable cost, and they will shut down if total revenue does not cover variable cost. Note that this shutdown decision is a short-run decision because in the long run, all costs are avoidable. To better understand this decision to stay open versus shut down, let's consider two examples. In example 1, imagine a firm that, if it stays open, will generate $100,000 in revenue, incur $80,000 in variable cost, and pay a fixed cost of $50,000. This firm has two choices. If it stays open, it will make a profit of its total revenue minus its variable cost minus its fixed cost of minus $30,000. If it, on the other hand, shuts down, it won't have any revenue, nor will it have to pay any variable or avoidable cost, but it will still have to pay its $50,000 fixed cost for a loss of $50,000. Here we see that the better decision is to stay open because in staying open, it will make a smaller loss or a bigger profit. Let's compare this to example 2. In example 2, we have a firm that, if it stays open, will generate $100,000 in total revenue. This firm, if it stays open, will incur $120,000 in variable cost, and regardless of whether it stays open or shuts down, will pay a fixed cost of $10,000. If this firm stays open, its profit will be, again, a $30,000 loss. However, if this firm shuts down, again, it won't have any revenue, it won't have to pay any variable costs, those are avoidable, but it will have to still pay its fixed cost of $10,000. In this situation, we see the better choice is for the firm to shut down because by shutting down, it makes a smaller loss or a bigger profit. What's the difference here? Well, in the first example, the firm's total revenue more than covered its variable cost. Its total revenue of $100,000 was $20,000 more than its variable cost of $80,000. So by staying open, it would more than cover its variable cost and in fact have $20,000 left over to put towards its fixed cost of $50,000. If it shuts down, it has to pay the entire $50,000 fixed cost, but by staying open, it can pay off part $20,000 of this fixed cost and so only lose $30,000. On the other hand, in our second example, the firm's total revenue by staying open was not enough to cover its variable cost. Not only does it have to pay the variable cost, but it also has to pay the fixed cost. So in staying open, this firm comes short, $20,000 short of covering its variable cost, and then on top of that has to still pay all $10,000 of its fixed cost. So it loses $30,000. It's better off by shutting down. It won't have any revenue, but it will avoid that $120,000 variable cost and so only have to pay the fixed cost of $10,000. Have you wondered why I'm only now covering profit maximization instead of talking about it under firm theory? In fact, I started firm theory by saying we're assuming that firms are profit maximizers, but then I really only got to cost minimization. So why are we only now talking about profit maximization under the organization of markets unit? The reason is that to understand profit maximization, we first do need to understand something about market structure. The output decision, remember, is about choosing where marginal revenue equals marginal cost, and the shutdown decision is about comparing total revenue with variable cost. As you will start to see in the organization of markets unit, revenue depends upon market structure. Marginal and total revenue are going to be different in a perfectly competitive market than they are in a monopoly market. That's why we only start the study of profit maximization once we come to the organization of markets unit. Here's a quick illustration of the difference in market structures. In perfect competition, unlike monopoly, marginal revenue is a horizontal line. I will explain this in later videos. Marginal revenue in monopoly, on the other hand, is a downward sloping line. In both market structures, regardless of what marginal revenue looks like, firms choose to produce where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. They then choose whether or not to stay open and produce that level or shut down by comparing total revenue with variable cost. Total revenue and variable cost both depend on the quantity the firm's going to produce, which is why first the firm had to determine if it was going to stay open, what quantity it would produce, and then decide based on that quantity whether or not it should stay open or shut down. If they stay open, they then seek the cost minimizing bundle of inputs to produce that profit maximizing level of output.